I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you today about remembering sacred moments. You know, so often in our lives, we think of sacred times as being those kinds of situations when we're in pristine or spiritual states, but really our sacred moments are scattered throughout our lives, and sometimes the most seemingly unsacred times are the really sacred moments, aren't they, Iris?
Yes, whatever is soul touching, whatever really deeply moves us, is sacred, a sacred moment. And I've forgotten who said, "You're standing on holy ground," and there's some famous person said that. But holy ground is wherever we are, where we're dedicated to higher living, to a better life for ourselves and for others. So those sacred moments come at unexpected times, don't they?
Absolutely. And, you know, as I said in my few opening comments, that we think so often of sacred
Hmm.
times in correlation to religious or spiritual times. But the sacredness of life and the sacredness of experience is really in those times when we connect with the divine, but also when we connect with each other. And I was just thinking as you were speaking, just as we were talking about what we were going to talk about today, about the fact that you babysit for your grandchild. And so many of the viewers and so many of us have spent time with children or infants or children of all ages. And those times are sacred, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They're very sacred, and they can be spiritually oriented, or they can just be life in the beauty of living. And I was telling a young lady today about my grandson, who's 22 months old, who, when his mother picked him up one day, and I have the pieta head on my wall, fairly close to the front door, and he said, he was saying to her, blessed mother, but she didn't know what he was saying because she hadn't heard him say it. I did, because he was pointing toward it. So he had her take him over so he could touch the Blessed Mother, and then he kissed her face. And so then that wasn't enough for him. He wanted his mother to touch it too. He didn't insist that his mother kiss the Blessed Mother, but he insisted that she touch it. And that was really a spiritually oriented sacred moment, and it was very moving. And he's at my home 3 days a week, so every day in the afternoon, we're always outside as a rule, and so he wants to take my hand and walk around the yard and see everything, see all the flowers, and any little bits of statuary or whatever that's there. And then there's a large, the Blessed Mother, the traditional Catholic one, is in the backyard. So he always wants to, so he leaves my hand and goes over and touches her like that, strokes it, and then he comes back over and takes my hand and we walk some more. And I think that's very precious. So I think he must have been very Catholic in his last life, because he has a dedication to her. And I said to his mother that he's very dedicated to the Blessed Mother, and she said, "Oh, he just likes anything that's statuary." And so whatever it is. But we have sacred moments of might not be spiritually oriented, just the time we spend with someone that's very deeply meaningful, or when we're feeling compassion for another, then that is a sacred time. And there's Caroline Mace tells about a woman who was in an accident, and then another woman 5 cars back prayed for her. The lady who was in the very terrible accident, it was a 20-car pileup, and so she was 5 cars back. And the woman in the accident left her body and went back and went through the air back to where the woman was praying for her, because the energy that woman put forth in her prayer work attracted the soul of this lady who was in the accident. So a month later, she was out of the hospital, and she'd gotten the lady's license plate. And this sounds unbelievable, but I know it's true. And so then she took flowers to that lady and said, "You prayed for me, and you were in the 5th car back when I was in that terrible accident a month ago. And I just want to thank you for your prayers." Because the woman had said to God, "I don't know who is in that car up there, God, but protect them and help them." And and she prayed very strongly and compassionately for the occupant. Those are very sacred moments. But then we can have sacred moments that are just light and rather trivial, can't we?
Absolutely. And those moments that come into our experience so often pass us by, or we pass them by, and we fail to see the sacredness of the experience. And one of the things that we'd like to encourage our viewers to do, and one of the things we encourage people at our center and we counsel and talk to people, is to grasp and experience the sacredness of life and the sacredness of experience in daily living.
Exactly.
And so often we think of all of these kinds of ideas as being so high-minded and noble, when in fact most of all of us live our lives out in daily experiences, one with another, in whether it's with your grandchild or whether it's with the myriad of people that we pass in our daily lives, the people that we come in contact with at work, or the people whom we don't even know that we walk by on the street. And the sacredness of the experience and the sacredness of the moment is so often transcendent of all of these labels that we have. And one of the wonderful things that we do on this program so often is we talk about the fact that we're never talking about anybody changing their religion or their spiritual faith tradition, but we're talking about universal principles that are true for everyone, just like what you just shared about your grandchild. You're not Catholic, and yet that the serenity of that statue and the serenity that that child sees from that statue. Now, of course, someone of that faith may choose to see something in that that's different than what you did. But the other aspect is that if we look at gardens, for instance, and very often the statuary in gardens do evoke a sacred feeling, a feeling of serenity and peace within us. And it may have nothing to do with our faith tradition. And, very often people who are very devoutly Christians, or people of no faith, may have a Buddha or may have a statue of the Blessed Mother or a Saint Francis or even some anything. Yes, very often they're religious, but sometimes they're just birds, and so often, or other animals, and we see so often expressions of nature bringing about the sacred moments of our lives. And it's wonderful when we have these tremendous experiences, when the organ's playing in the chapel and these religious experiences, but to see the sacred in the simple daily experiences of life and not make it a religious experience, but to make it an acknowledgement of the sacred.
Yeah. The spiritual aspect of being is totally not necessarily the religious aspect of being.
Absolutely, and that's a hard distinction for many people. So religious, when we're religious, we're not necessarily spiritual.
Exactly.
But this reality of spiritual truth brings us peace and serenity of mind, of spirit, and of body. And when we see a baby, for instance, a newborn baby, I mean, most of us are moved to a sense of sacredness or reverence for life. And if we could just become aware of the sacred moments in our lives and also draw upon and create sacred moments in our lives. One of the things that many people do is to create altars or places within their home where they can have a sanctuary or a place that allows them to be centered in the sacred or the spiritual. And I think that's a good thing. It's very much like having a statue or having a Bible or having a cross or having any kind of a symbol that's religious or spiritual. But I think that what we need to do is to even go beyond that and see the sacred moments. And that, of course, is our topic today, the sacred moments in our lives. And really, you and I have had a lot of sacred moments just between friends, the friendship that we've shared over the years. And so that sacredness of the moment needs to be savored, and it needs to be valued, and it needs to be revered, and it needs to be built up in our lives so that when we are faced with difficulties and when we are stressed and when we are depressed and when we are hurt and all of those things that come into our lives, we're able to draw upon those sacred moments.
Yes, and I have heard them called golden moments, and it would be the same thing, and to cherish our golden moments. And as you said so well, it might just be seeing a bird or hearing a bird sing or any minute thing. And back to my grandson, I planted several seeds of sunflowers, and only one grew. So I waited till Colton was there to plant it, to put it in the ground. I'd put it in a little pot to put the seeds. So he helped me plant it. And he goes out and looks at it all the time. And I was just thinking when you were talking too that yesterday he wanted me to go out with him to see it. And I said, no, Colton, I'm reading. I can't go right now. So he went over and squatted down in front of the plant and was just, he sat there a really long time admiring it. And then later I went with him, and I'll never not go with him when he wants to do something, because those are sacred moments. Those are golden moments. And it wouldn't have to be a relative. It can be any child. But when someone wants our attention, then we can give it. And it takes so little to be above average in responding to people's needs. And when we do, we have far more sacred moments that we can experience.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendously important message that we need to share, and that is that people are asking and reaching out to us all the time.
Yes.
And if we simply respond
Yes.
to their reach or to their touch, then we do create those sacred moments. And so often we let it pass us by. And in your case, I'm sure what you were reading was very interesting, but you could do that anytime. But your time with Colton is very limited.
Yes.
And our time with any of us, any of our relationships or our circle of friends, or even with strangers, our time together is very, very limited. And so to respect that and to seize those sacred moments and to savor them and to put them away in our heart and our minds really is a tremendous, tremendous treasure to have.
Yes, it is. And it inspires other people and changes lives. And I'm sure you've had people say to you, because I could say to you, that when you said a certain thing at a certain time, it made all the difference in the world in my life. And we never know how our lives are going to, and our words are going to impact on others. You don't have to be a minister to impress truth on the lives of other people. And so we need to all be very aware, as you said, of other people's needs and respond, even if it's just for an instant, just to acknowledge that need.
Absolutely, and you just touched on a great point, and that is that ministers and priests and rabbis and psychologists and social workers and counselors and therapists and all of the teachers and all of these authority figures, we think they're the people that do the things that matter in life, but in fact we all do things that matter in life.
Exactly.
And so we all impart wisdom, we all impart love, we all connect with others. And interestingly, I think as we do that, there's a physiological benefit too, isn't there? And so often on this program we talk about the mind, body, spirit connection, but having and cultivating sacred moments, being aware of them and treasuring them and keeping them in our consciousness and thinking about them, and also thinking about opportunities and ways in which we could create sacred moments, creates within us a sense of serenity that translates into good health, doesn't it?
Exactly. It makes all the difference in the world in anyone's health. And it's just so important that we be aware of other people. And as we're aware of them, then our energy goes out to them. And when we give energy to another person, then they give that energy, they pass it on. And so it's a never-ending stream of goodness. And I think that's why the mass consciousness, the global brain aspect, is far different today than it has been. It's constantly changing because mankind constantly changes. And I think we're on an upward spiral, and have always been and still are, so that this upward spiral leads us not straight up the mountain to God, but on a spiral to God. And everything we do that helps others helps the spiral go up. And more people are aware of the needs of others. More and more people are responding in a loving way. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. And contrary to conventional wisdom, we are living in wonderful times.
Yes.
And good things are happening. And of course, our faith tradition and what we help people understand in our counseling work is that things are getting better and better, and that spiral is going upward. And in the second half of the program, we'll talk a lot about that, or some more about that. But we'd like to pause at this point and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue to study the ideas and concepts that we're sharing.
We would like to offer you the opportunity to receive one of these free booklets to further your understanding of the New Thought message of confident living. Each month we will feature a different booklet, which will be mailed to you free and postage paid. Simply address your request to Confident Living, at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807.
We can really create sacred moments, can't we? And in the last or the second half of the program, in the few minutes we have left, I'd like us to talk about how we can create sacred moments, and also talk a little bit about this issue of how the sacred moments of our lives do create the energy that you talked about. And I think for a lot of our viewers, that may be a new concept. For metaphysicians and people from New Thought backgrounds, it's not a new concept at all. But our thoughts do create energy, don't they? And our feelings create energy, and they go out in waves from us, and they're felt by other people. And so as we create sacred moments and sacred experiences for ourselves and for others, we're really doing a service to ourselves or for ourselves and to others. But creating some sacred moments, I guess some real basic ways are just to respect other people and to take every opportunity that we can to meet the needs of people when they're calling out to us, when they're reaching out to us, and then taking the initiative to create that experience of connection whenever we can.
Yes, and on a soul level, we're all whole and pure and God-like on a soul level. So we talk a great deal about, you and I, about meditation, and we advocate that wholly. Well, when we meditate, we go home to God, so we're connected with Creator God. And when we just, we don't have to really be in a state of meditation, but it can be the same state of consciousness, of deep awareness. And so as we're in that state of deep awareness, and it doesn't mean we're meditating or asleep, but we're just more aware of everything, then we will sense the needs of others, and we'll be more apt to not do what I did with Colton, to say, Colton, I have to read, and let him go over and look at the flower by himself, but be sensitive to the need, and then, or is it just a momentary whim? And so that makes a big difference in our connection with other people. Another thing that's very important is we each have a guardian angel, and there are countless angelic beings, different orders of angels, and countless beings in each order. So they are always there to impress us, not only our guardian, but other angelic beings. And so when we are attuned to the inner, when we're alert and wide awake and attuned, then we are receptive to the angelic beings, the prompting. And I think they prompt us a great deal.
Absolutely. And that prompting is always to the right way and the right action
Exactly.
that is needed at the given time or the given moment. And so often we rely upon ourselves, or we'd like to think that we rely upon ourselves, when in fact we need to allow the prompting of the spirit, the prompting of the angelic, the prompting of the unseen, the prompting of the intuition, that inner being and inner knowing to direct us in ways in which we can act and react, the things that we can say and do that will create a sacredness for ourselves and for other people.
Yes, and when we do, life is far richer. We stay more serene and more centered, and we impact on the lives of other people in a positive way. And whether it's when we're getting our groceries checked out, or buying something else at a store, or talking with any public person, it makes a difference in their lives too, if we're calm and serene and receptive to their energy. And as we say here so often, you and I, that everything is vibration, everything is energy. So we know that every physicists tell us that is true. And so then when we're in contact with other people and giving out good vibes, then they pick up that energy and use it. And again, it's like a round robin. Then others do that and others do that, so that all of life is elevated.
Absolutely. And as we give it out, we create the opportunities to share with others and for them to benefit. But as we're receptive of that vibration, good things come to us as well. And we can actually draw more sacred moments, and draw more serenity, and draw more prosperity, and draw more peace, and draw all of the good and positive attributes of greater good in our lives to us through our openness to this reality.
Yes, and then when there's chaos around us, then if we stay serene, it helps the other people to calm down. And you and I both do quite a lot of counseling, and we know that the people who come to us for counseling, the things that are troubling them, the reason they need counseling is because they've lived through a great deal of chaos, a chaotic home life or chaotic business, or somewhere there's chaos in their life, and they see the need to change, and so they come for help so they can change. And so it's a wonderful thing when people are aware that they need the help. But isn't it true that it's a chaotic condition that people live in that creates the opposite of sacred moments?
Absolutely. It's the chaos, and that creates confusion.
Right.
And that confusion, and so often when we talk to people, they tell us, well, I'm so confused. Or the other thing that people say, and I know you find this in your counseling work as any counselor does, I'm so tired all the time. You know, people are so tired. Well, the fact is that if we could draw upon sacred moments, and if we create a sacredness within our lives and are receptive to and creative of those sacred moments, we don't get as tired because it is revitalizing, it is strengthening, and it is empowering us as opposed to just wearing us out.
Yeah.
And I think so many people today are just plain worn out because they are unable to control the direction of their thoughts.
Yeah.
They're in the midst of confusion and chaos. They're believing that the external events and experiences of life are really dictating to them how life is to be, when in fact, we each of us have the ability to take control of our lives when we take control of the way that we think about life and the way that we see life. And so many people see life in a confused way, in a negative way, in a painful way. And of course, a lot of people draw upon the negative experiences of the past and memories. And so there are a myriad of things that create confusion and hurt and pain in our lives. And if we could just step out of that and step into the sacredness and into seeing the sacred moments and experiencing them and savoring them, we would begin to bring our lives into sync, or as we say, we would center our lives, which we could do a whole program on centering, and we would center our lives and center our consciousness in the presence and the power of who and what we are.
Yes. And when we feel the chaotic conditions around us, we have to not resist. And if I would give any advice to anyone in counseling or people who are listening to our program, it would be resist not, whatever the situation is. And that doesn't mean we absorb the negativity, but it just means we don't resist it. It doesn't touch us. It's as if we're standing with a glass shield around us. And in fact, we can put light, the light of living Christ, or the divine light around us. And as we put that light around us, it's easier to not allow evil and negativity to assail our energies.
And then we are surrounded by sacredness.
Exactly.
And of course, we're always surrounded by sacredness, but the reality is that we allow ourselves to deny that, and we allow the non-reality of experiences to permeate that shield that you're talking about. And the other thing I think is really important for us to remind all of our viewers, and we say it so often in our counseling and the church and when we talk, is that however any of us feel is okay. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be in pain. It's okay to be sad. However we feel is okay. And we need to really get that straight, because if we start denying how we feel, then we'll never change.
Exactly.
And we begin to go down a road that is certainly counterproductive. So what we want to do is we want to acknowledge where we are and how we feel, and then decide that this is either the way I want to feel or the way I don't want to feel. And if our lives are not the way we want them to be, and we're not feeling the way we want to feel, then maybe what we need is a few more sacred moments. Maybe we need to be able to create sacredness in our lives, and we need to attract it, and we need to send it forth, and that can happen. And it is not an easy thing, but it's not an unattainable thing.
That's correct. And how do we do that? We do it by the same way that you and I say all the time: deep breathing. Just breathe deeply, and then center, as you said, center the self, so that we're connected with divine creative energy. And when we do that, we know the difference. We feel the shift. And sometimes we have to consciously do it. And sometimes we might become angry, we might become impatient, we might become many negative things can assail us. But when we take our deep breath and then just feel our energy connected with Creator God, then it makes a difference. And a lot of people might say, well, by the time I do all that, I wouldn't be able to remember what to do. Well, it's not complicated. It's just bringing in the prana of God, the deep energy, and then knowing that we are a part of Creator God, and we're all connected. Every person is connected to each other person. So we're really, when we do that, we're not only centering our own energy, but we are lifting the mass consciousness.
Right. And creating this sacredness of life
Yes.
and the sacred moments that will create. And so we would come to a point in time where every moment is sacred.
Mhm.
And of course it is. And every experience is sacred. And of course it is. And so when we come to that point, but you're absolutely right in giving counsel to people to center themselves. And what we need to do as well as we begin this process of just deep breathing and centering ourselves in the presence and power of who and what we are and uniting our consciousness with divine mind, is we need to really disconnect with the experience and we need to be quiet. And that's difficult for a lot of us because we don't want, when we're engaged in conversation, the thing that we want to do is we want to respond right away. And of course, so often people will want a response from us. But, the old adage that we were told is count to 10, take a deep breath, walk around the block, do those things. They're very wise. That's wise counsel.
Exactly. Because if you count to 10, you have to have calmed down a bit. And so any of those things, and we need to see what upsets us and then work on that. Again, not resist it. The point is the opposite of resisting, but just to let it be and let it pass and just say, this doesn't reach me, this doesn't concern me. And so we can, whatever makes sense to us, that's what we say. And it's good if we have a mantra in a sense. It's just like, I know when I used to work, I would say peace. And I wouldn't say it verbally, but just send out that energy of peace. And it makes a big difference. When people come up to your desk and and they are really upset, well, you can, if you just say silently peace, it sends out the energy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It centers in that sacred moment and
Yes.
it creates for the moment
Yes.
a sacredness of life. And during this brief time, we've been talking to you about creating sacred moments, and we hope that the information that we've been sharing with you is useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Mike and Iris would like to extend a cordial invitation for you to join them this Sunday morning at 11 a.m. for our weekly celebration service at the beautiful Seaport Marina Hotel at the corner of Pacific Coast Highway and 2nd Street, adjacent to the Marina Pacifica and Marketplace shopping centers. There will be a guided meditation, prayers, spirited music, and a dynamic, life-changing New Thought message. Please join us this Sunday. You will be warmly welcomed into the company of like-minded, positive, and uplifting people. And remember, whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can attain it through confident living.